Hello, my name is Seth Cantu. I'm a junior theology major at Walla University. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Screaming Rock Media for this scholarship opportunity and really this education. I thought when I started this that this was going to be an easy task. You know, I was going to just breeze through this. I know how we're saved. I know how we're made righteous. I know of the nature of Christ and how it's integrated and involved. I thought this was going to be a cakewalk. And turned out to be a real blessing because it wasn't. I was confronted with a lot of the preconceptions and the assumptions that I thought everyone knew. I thought this was something that could be easily done and understood. I didn't realize what my own lack of study and self-study had resulted in. And I'm guessing that is the purpose and the point of these scholarships, is to get people to actually study this subject. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity because it has made an impact. But I digress. Let's really get into the study of righteousness by faith. You know, as I began to study and I was really delving into the Word, the Spirit kept bringing things to mind and kept unfolding more and more. The scene on Calvary, it was the repentant thief that just kept coming to mind. You know, I see Christ being placed up there in between two thieves. And we see this wonderful dichotomy. You know, just as it says in Luke chapter 23, starting in verse 39, it says, one of the criminals who was hanging blasphemed, saying, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." If. It's the same thing Satan said when he tried to tempt him. If you are. But the other one, the repentant thief, looked at him. It says it rebuked him, answering, saying, "Do you not even fear God, seeing that you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward for our deeds." You know, it started bringing all the characteristics of the thief himself, especially the repentant one. You know, he was a thief. He did the things that he's accused of. He says, we are here because of what we have done. But this man has done nothing wrong. He's saying, we're guilty. We did these things. We are up here justly. But this man has done nothing wrong. The thieves on the cross are us. It's the choices we can make. We are guilty. We deserve justly the wages of sin. But the repentant thief points to Jesus and says he has done nothing wrong, and looks at Jesus and says, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." We need to take a careful look of exactly how Jesus appeared in this scene. He was just marched down the road from Jerusalem. He was scourged. He was beaten. He was bleeding. He had the crown of thorns on his head. He had been nailed to a cross. He had been hoisted up for all to see naked. They tried to shame him. He had been falsely accused. At this moment in time, from a secular, worldly view, he looked nothing like a king. Yet this man looked at him and said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." That's faith. He looked at him and didn't see the broken skin, the bruises, the bleeding. He saw him in the eyes of faith and saw him as Lord. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. And the Lord told him that he was going to be in paradise. Now, the thief on his own could do nothing. He could do nothing at that moment to save himself. He couldn't get down off the cross. And yet, Christ still said he would be in paradise. Nothing up to that point could have saved the thief. If he was able to get down off that cross, nothing without Christ would have allowed him, would have earned him heaven. There's nothing that we can do that gives us the right to look at God and say, "You owe me heaven." But the thief shall be in paradise. This scene reminds me of a story someone told me one time. It was during World War I. A conversation was overheard in this trench full of bodies. There was a wounded man, and he was having a conversation. He was at the point of death. With him was a friend who he had been with through boot camp. They'd been with through all these tragedies. And he knew what kind of life he had led. He had made plenty of bad choices. He had spent time in prison. Even now, he was wanted back home by the police. The dying man drew his friend down close to his face. He removed his own dog tags and thrust them into the hands of his friend. He said, "Listen, Dominic, you've had a really bad life. You were born into a very tough situation. Even now, you're wanted by the police. But I don't have any convictions. I have nothing against me. My slate is clean. So take my dog tags, my wallet, my papers, my identity, my good name, and my life. Give me your dog tags. Give me your papers, and I will carry your crimes away with me in death." At that moment, Dominic was a free man. That's what Christ did for us. He took the condemnation. He took the penalty of the choices we have made. He took them upon himself. And he gives us his reputation, his good name, and puts it on us, his robes of righteousness. Now, what would have happened if Dominic, who lightly valued this gesture from his friend, had lost those papers, had thrown them away, had refused them when they were offered? Well, then he would have had to stand before his own consequences. He would have had to have the condemnation on himself. but he was free. Now, what do you think Dominic did with that new life? Do you think he went out and made the same choices that put him there in the first place? If that thief was able to come down from that cross, would he have made the same choices that put him up there in the first place? Notice that Dominic is no longer just having a second chance, but he is having second chance in the name of his friend. We too. We have new life, but we have it in the name of. How do you think Dominic felt about his friend? Do you think he took his good name and immediately sullied it? No, because it's more precious. We are given that second chance. We are given that opportunity. But not just that, we are given a good name. In his name, we are given the second chance. He didn't do anything to earn that name. He had no part of it. But like Jesus, we take it in faith. So we don't end up in the same situation. We make different choices. Not to earn it, we've already been given it. But so that we don't ever go back. He takes us where we are. At that moment, like Dominic, we are found just. We are justified. Now that's a legal term. It's different than being pardoned. When we are accused of something, we go into court and they read out the accusations. And being pardoned is you are found guilty. And yet you are freed. You are shown grace when it comes to the consequences of that wrong action. But that's not what justification is. We are found just. This means that we are found innocent of the accusations. Christ took it all. He took it all upon himself. And we don't have to earn it. We don't have to do something. We sometimes think we can't do it because we don't know enough. We haven't learned enough. We're not good enough. We're not any of these things. It's not about us. It reminds me of another story. There was a young boy who was traveling with his parents across country. And they were going some distance, and unfortunately, tragedy struck. And they got into a very bad car accident. In fact, it was so bad that the young boy actually lost his left arm. But this young man had a goal in his life, a dream that he wanted to fulfill. And he always wanted to learn judo. You know, for him, it was something he's always wanted to do, but as he went from commercial dojo to commercial dojo, he always got the same answers. I'm sorry, we can't. We're afraid you'll get hurt. Our insurance won't cover it. We were unable. But he didn't give up. He went from place to place to place, always told that he wasn't able to, hinting that he wasn't good enough. Finally, one day, he found an old retired teacher who was willing to train him. He says, I'm willing to train you, but only on 2 conditions. One, once you start, you cannot stop. There is no giving up in the middle of it when things get hard. And 2, you can't question how I train you. Now, the young man was so excited, he didn't really listen to those conditions, but he accepted readily. And months go by, and as he's training with this old teacher, he's realizing that he's only learning one move. And he does that move every day, over and over, all day. But he wasn't going to break the agreement. And so 6 months goes by, and he still only learned one move. And so he builds up the confidence, and he asks the teacher, "Teacher, why am I only learning one move?" The teacher looks at him and says, "You remember the agreement?" He goes, yes, but I just wanted to know. The teacher looked at him and says, "Well, then I'll tell you. You're only learning one move because you only need to know one move." I don't know about you, but that didn't answer the boy's question. But he continued all the same. He was surprised when a year later, his teacher entered him into a tournament. He's thinking to himself, "I can't do this. I only know one move. How in the world can I compete with these other people?" But he was surprised when he blew through the preliminaries, winning every single match. He was surprised even more when he got all the way up to the semifinals. And all he did was defend himself, waiting for his opponent to make one mistake, to do that one thing that would trip them up. He would do his one move, and he would pin them, and he would win the match. Then he got to the final. At the final, he found an opponent who was bigger, stronger, faster, and more experienced than he was. In fact, it looked so lopsided that the ref called time on the match and went to the instructor and said, "I'm afraid this boy is going to get hurt. I think I need to stop the match." The old teacher looked at him and said, "No, he can do this." He had been in the industry for many years, and so his opinion was respected. And so they allowed the match to continue. 30 seconds after they restarted the match, his opponent lowered his guard. He did his one move, and he pinned him to the mat. He won. Everything became a blur to him. He was so excited. On the drive home in the van, he finally couldn't take anymore, and he turned to the teacher and said, "How did I win? I only know one move. These guys know so many moves. They were going over all the moves that were used. They knew so much more. How did I win?" So the teacher pulls the van over and says, "You won for 2 reasons. 1, you have nearly mastered one of the hardest throws in all of judo. And 2, the only known defense for this move is if your opponent grabs your left arm." What was viewed as his greatest weakness, what he thought was a handicap, what he thought was his deficiency, what made him less than, is exactly what made him strong. It is the same with us. When we empty ourselves of what we think, what we believe, what we're told, the less of us that is in it, the more of Christ that can be put in it. The more of his love, the more of him living through us. It's not something we have to learn. He takes us where we are, where we're at, and he gives us this as a free gift. Our part is we have to accept it in faith. You can't get a gift from someone you don't believe in. You can't stand on the promises of someone you don't believe exists. But that faith, it says without faith we are unable to please the Lord. But by faith we can do all things. I'm a storyteller thanks to my grandfather. Native culture, everything is relayed in a story. Heck, look at Christ. He spoke in stories and parables. I don't know why we ever stopped. But I share too a lot in stories. So forgive me, here's another one. there was a old man sitting on a bridge, and he was playing a very badly tuned violin. And as he was screeching out some tune, a very well-dressed man and his wife walked past. And he stopped and he listened, and he asked a question as he threw money into his case. He goes, "May I borrow your violin?" The old man, seeing the amount of money that he put in his case, readily agreed and handed his violin over. This man, the finely dressed man, drew the bow across the strings and made it a little adjustment, and again made a little adjustment, and finally drew the bow across, and this sweet sound resonated from this beat up old violin. And he began to play. And the playing was so beautiful that it literally stopped traffic. There was no honking of horns. There was no people yelling. People stopped and listened. And pretty soon this whispering started to be heard. "Do you know who that is? Yeah, do you know who that is?" Turns out that this was Paganini, the composer. He had taken this beat up violin from this old man, and he had turned it into something beautiful. And that's us. When we, by faith, place ourselves in the hands of the Master, he can make something beautiful. That's how important righteousness by faith is. By seeing the character of God, we are able to do what we cannot do on our own. We see that he perfectly bridged the gap between humanity and divinity. It is true what it says in the Bible. We have to understand this faith because it is the truth. It says, "Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free."